Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. It just broke probably within the last hour before we started recording. It is the North Carolina Tar Heels. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. North Carolina, we haven't talked about. Let me backtrack. We did a lot on North Carolina probably about 3-4 weeks ago. North Carolina was really struggling. They were not playing well. I think there was a big push at one point that like, hey, Hubert Davis, are we having this conversation? If you remember after the first Duke game, they were sitting at 13-10 overall, 6-5 in the conference. They then beat Pitt by 1. Then lost to Clemson to fall to 14-11 overall. And so it's kind of been quiet at North Carolina, but there was some serious questions about Hubert Davis. Well, they've won 4 straight to their credit. That includes a win on Monday night against Florida State. But again, there was some talk about like, is it at all possible that Hubert Davis might not be back this coming season? Well, I bring it up because we did get some news, as I said, just a few minutes before we went live on air. And it sure does seem like Hubert Davis ain't going anywhere. And that is because, again, about an hour before we went on air, how about this? One of the local newspapers, I don't know if they put in a Freedom of Information Act or what, but basically said men's head coach Hubert Davis, men's basketball coach Hubert Davis, agreed to a contract extension with North Carolina over the summer. It was officially decided in December. The new deal extends to 2030 overall. So I think the big question is, like, did North Carolina make a mistake deciding that they wanted to bring back Hubert Davis? And like, is this at all surprising? So let's start with the surprising stuff. I'll be real. I don't think it's really that surprising to me, okay? When I knew, and I think we even talked about this at the time, when I knew that North Carolina, that nothing was probably going to happen on the coaching front as far as firing Hubert Davis, about 3 weeks ago, remember, he did the coaches show where he said, we need to change the structure of this team and of this program and of this organization. And it starts with hiring a GM. And I found that very interesting at the time when we talked about it, is I said, like, look, first of all, I think there was the debate of like, should you even be firing him at all? Won the ACC regular season last year, went to the Final Four in year 1. But of course, it was worth noting that if they missed the NCAA tournament this year, that would be 2 and 4 years. Okay, so I think there was a legitimate argument of North Carolina. If you miss twice in 4 years, should you be allowed back for a 5th year? But as soon as he started talking about we need to hire a GM, we need to go ahead and change how we are operating this program, that kind of said to me that he's probably coming back. I don't think he goes on a coach's show and talks about changes he is going to make in the offseason. If he does not believe he is going to be back, if he does not believe that he is going to return, and if he frankly has not already had those kinds of conversations with his AD. So as soon as he started talking about like, hey, we're probably going to need to hire a GM and get this thing going in the right direction, that kind of said to me he's going to be back. I think everything's going to be fine. I think he's going to get another year. And by the way, it is worth noting, kind of in conjunction with the news that a contract extension was signed in December, is that North Carolina actually did announce its GM on Monday, or whatever today is, Tuesday, that Jim Tanner, a longtime NBA agent, is coming on as the GM. So not only did Hubert Davis say he wanted a GM, he officially hired one on Tuesday afternoon, and I'm not really surprised by that. I will tell you, behind the scenes, people are trying to figure out the portal, who's going to be in, who's going to be out. This is not a hire that you make the day the season ends. This is a hire you make now, so all the ducks are in a row. So in a month from now, when the portal opens, you know who you're targeting, who you want, who you don't, who you this, who you that. And so to me, not really surprising, but I think the big question is it the right decision? This might be unpopular with North Carolina fans. I actually think it is the right decision, and I don't want to call it a no-brainer, but I don't think I have much argument that this was the move that should be made. I'll tell you why. It's a couple things. One, the resume is not terrible, okay? We've seen colossal disasters as head coaches. Kenny Payne at Louisville, Matt Doherty at North Carolina, Billy Gillispie at Kentucky. This has not been that, okay? You can argue North Carolina should be operating at a higher level. You can argue that the year they made the Final Four, they were not good for most of the season. But at the same time, Final Four in year 1, won the ACC last year. This year, and by the way, I had him in the top 10 in the preseason, so I'm not going to sit here and lie and say that I didn't. But the counter to that is like, you could also argue, like, you know what? Like, we kind of knew in June, when this roster came together, that the roster was lacking big guys, and that's been their issue, and it's going to continue to be their issue until next season, regardless of what happens. But we always knew this roster was a little bit flawed. I would also add, I think this is going to be the new model in college sports with rev share, with NIL the way that it is. I think most schools are going to give the head coach an extra year because it's going to be a lot cheaper to just put an extra $5 million into NIL or $3 million into NIL or whatever it ends up being. It's always going to be easier to do that than it is to just fire a head coach, right? We saw it with Florida football this year. I mean, there was talk like Billy Napier's not coming back. Then it's like, oh, DJ Legway's actually really good, and we're going to lose him in the portal if we don't let him go. Now, the team got hot at the end, but Florida kind of decided to, you know what? Rather than spending $25 million to fire Billy Napier, let's spend $5 million on NIL, hope that he can put a competitive roster on the field this year, and then if it doesn't work, then we get rid of him next year. And you get the point. So I'm not surprised. I think this was the right decision. And ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, I say give them another year. It's also worth noting, like, they're starting to play better. They're 17 and 11 right now. I think they're going to the NCAA tournament. I know this is a different conversation, but like, I know they haven't been playing well, but they're 17 and 11. Their final 3 games are Miami at home, or I think it's at Miami, Virginia Tech, and Duke at home. Miami is not very good. We're going to talk about them in a minute because I think I know who their next head coach is. I think we all know who their next head coach is. But then also, Virginia Tech is probably going to fire their coach. And then you have Duke at home. And so, listen, they're sitting at, again, 18 and 11 right now. You win 2 out of those 3. Let's say you lose to Duke. You're 20 and 12. All of your losses are good. By the way, think about this. The 4 number 1 seeds in the NCAA tournament could be Auburn, Alabama, Florida, and Duke. What do those 4 schools have in common? North Carolina played them all. Now, they could very well end up being 0-5 or 0-6 against them if they face Duke in the ACC tournament, but they had an insane schedule. So I think they're going to make the tournament. I'm guessing this was the right move. And I think more than anything, North Carolina, Hubert Davis is a North Carolina guy. They wanted to give him 1 more year to really just figure out, like, dude, are you the guy? Are you not the guy? Can you figure this out or not? We're going to give you all the resources. We're going to give you all the NIL. And so far, like, I know it's hard to say, but so far so good. They're winning. Caleb Wilson is heading to Carolina. I think some of those freshmen that we thought were going to be one and dones, maybe they're back. All of a sudden, that trajectory looks a lot different. Do still think you got to close out this season. You have to get to the NCAA tournament. Again, I think if you go 2-1 over your final 3, you're probably in good shape. Don't lose some weird game at the ACC tournament to somebody awful like NC State or Boston College or something. But right now, if the season ended today, they would be the 6th seed at the ACC tournament. If they win 2 of their final 3, they'll be 13 and 7 in ACC play. And then you get next year to figure out, okay, is he officially the guy or not? Not surprised, not even frustrated. I think it was probably the right decision.